Good afternoon. Let us go ahead and call the Public Safety Committee meeting to order for Tuesday, December 13th. The first item on the agenda is an update from the Grand Rapids Police Department on monthly and year-to-date crime statistics. I think it's you, Chief Winstrom. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Commissioner, members of the committee. Thanks for having me today. We're both trying to run at the same time. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. And just a reminder that data that I'll be talking about today is available publicly at the link provided on the screen here now. We're up to 21 homicides in the city, which is 21 too many. It is below the year-to-date average of 24. We have seen progress in the past few months. We hope that that progress continues to next year. Detectives have been doing a phenomenal job. As you can see, again, for last year, they far exceeded the national average of clearance rate. This year, we're up to about 66% and headed in the right direction with more majority, actually, of the murders in prosecutorial review. So I'm sure we'll end the year even higher, much higher than the national average. The officers on the street still doing an excellent job proactively recovering 487 illegally possessed weapons year to date to this point. Aggravated assaults in the city are down from last year, but still above the 3-year to date average. Auto thefts, as you can see, have really skyrocketed this year, and that's a conversation we've had. We've talked about the Kia and Hyundai problem. We were at a high of an average of 4 attempts or thefts of those vehicles every day in the city. Fortunately, we've seen it drop drastically. We're down to about an average of 1 a day. Burglaries are down citywide, as you can see, not only compared to 2021, but come far below the average of the previous 3 years. If you do take a look at the publicly available data that I referenced when I started this, you'll see we've made some enhancements to it. You can see year-to-date comparisons now, and as well, you'll still have access to the same raw data, so you can create your own comparisons as well. Just want to talk about the city and separate a little bit for numbers right now. And just a reminder, the police department has the city separated into 5 service areas: west, north, central, south, and east. And if you see in this graphic here, the east is the southernmost, just to add a little confusion. Crime by service area, as I mentioned, aggravated assaults are actually down across the city. Unfortunately, you'll see that's not citywide. You see a increase of 25% in the east service area. Auto theft is elevated across the entire city, as I mentioned. Murders, we're talking small numbers of murders, so statistically probably not scientifically significant. However, each one is obviously extremely significant to the individuals involved. Burglaries are down really across the city. There's a slight bump in the west service area, and with 24, exactly 24 last year, year-to-date as well. No change in the central service area. In response to a lot of community input that we've got, there has been calls for increased level of presence of police officers downtown. And I've said early on in my tenure here that ideally when we reach staffing levels that we can accomplish this, I would love to have foot patrols downtown. People are calling, they want to see the police presence, they want to see a familiar face, they want to know the name of the officers. And eventually I'm optimistic that we will get there where we'll be back in a position where we have regular foot patrols of the same officers downtown. In the meantime, because there has been a significant drop of violent crime across the city during the holiday season, as increased holiday foot traffic has been taking place downtown, we have managed to staff up with our one discretionary resources, a special response team. As if you can see, they've been out, they've been visiting businesses. I know in this chamber you've heard some complaints from specific businesses. We've been making sure we've been checking in, asking them if they have any specific complaints or concerns, working with them as well, stopping individuals that are committing crimes, minor crimes, things like being in the parks after closing, and relaying the information to the individuals that we will have a police presence downtown, and we expect everyone to comply with the law. Additionally, you've heard me say before that the argument can be made that drugs are a victimless crime, and you can make an argument for that, except when you lose a loved one to an overdose, or when someone's dealing drugs right outside your door, and there's the chance of violence outside. So, fentanyl is something that's very important to us and the prevalence in our city. And fortunately, we have avoided some of the oftentimes cartel-related violence associated with large levels of drug trafficking. But our vice team, in cooperation with the DEA, recently recovered this. This was about a week ago. As you can see in this picture, what's in this picture is about 15 pounds of powdered cocaine in those colored packages. A couple of handguns, which signifies that these people weren't anticipating the possibility of violence, as well as subsequent search warrant. We got 3 more handguns off these individuals. And at the top in that gray package marked Chulos, that's over 2 pounds of fentanyl. And that's a real concern to us. We were very happy that we took that off the street. That was 2 pounds of fentanyl that was destined for the streets of Grand Rapids. And the streets of Grand Rapids, as you can see from the numbers on the side, has had 34 overdose deaths this year in our city. Something that is a great concern of mine. We've had 22 successful Narcan administrations where we've actually saved individuals suffering from near fatal overdoses. We've responded in total to 166 overdoses, and that's just the police. The fire department probably has been to even more. So it's a concern of ours, but I know it's a concern of many in the city and want to know it's on our radar. It's something that we're very focused on, and something that I think we're doing a very good job on. That is the update so far. I do want to say one other positive thing. We just this week onboarded another Network 180 clinician. We have doubled the size of our mobile crisis response. We now have 2 teams, and that's obviously we'll double our ability to respond to individuals in mental health crisis where there's an element of a public safety aspect as well. So very excited about that. And I'm happy to take any questions. I know that there's subsequent presentations involving downtown issues. Just keeping that in mind, but obviously I'm at your disposal for any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you, Chief. I have a question before asking colleagues if they have anything to ask. You mentioned the addition of a second clinician. Is that for the same shift, or is that for an additional shift?
Right now, the way we worked it is one of them starts at 6 a.m., one of them starts at 7 a.m., but they have opposite days off. So they'll be able to cover, on average, we'll have somebody during the daytime hours up to about 5 o'clock every day of the week. We have trained, we had 4 police officers volunteer for the assignment. What we're doing is training all of them and having them kind of rotate through as they work, with the anticipation of it would be great if we could, turn this team of 4 and a team of 8, or wherever we can go. We know that we'll be able to have the manpower to do that on our end if Network 180 sees fit to give us more bodies.
Okay. One other question before I hand it to my colleagues, and that is, when I look at the crime by service area data, I think this in many ways speaks, and look at the map, I think it speaks to, I think one of the issues that we have in terms of what's being communicated, or what's being communicated to the community in terms of in looking at this, the downtown is not a place that's seen as having significant violence. And so I think that, again, we've heard that, or it's been put out there that downtown is a place that is violent or unsafe. And when I look at the data and I look at the map, that doesn't come across as the same.
We had an incident in November, was the last major incident of violence, where a mentally unwell individual struck 2 women with a piece of metal that was found. They were, I'm sure it was extremely unsettling and very scary, but fortunately neither one of them were injured significantly. The officers were on scene almost immediately and apprehended the individual. However, that one incident was on the news, and it gained a lot of traction. You saw the same thing with an incident at the Blue Bridge, which was a very isolated, very specific thing where we had individuals shooting at each other. So it's not a sign that downtown's unsafe. It's a sign that those 4 individuals who are engaging in that behavior at the Blue Bridge put themselves in an unsafe situation. So the kind of story that's been told of extremely unsafe, I mean, what we're not seeing is we don't have, out of control robberies downtown, or random incidents of shooting or things like that. If you look at the data, it is a very safe downtown. Having said that, I know that any one individual that experienced any sort of violence would probably say otherwise. But you are correct that Where we're seeing more violence is in the South Service area and the East Service area, which is why we, especially over the summertime, dedicated those additional resources there, and that's exactly where they'll probably end up again as we review the data coming in as it warms up.
Very good. Okay. Commissioner O'Connor.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. The mental health co-response model, how many total mental health clinicians would we need to be able to offer at least one person on shift 24/7?
Boy, let's see. I want to say 8. If you take into account discretionary days off and 24-hour service, it would probably be either 7 or 8 to get 24-hour coverage.
So you'd also then need 8 adjoining GRPD members?
What's that, sir?
You'd also then need 8 GRPD members total.
Well, actually, it would be a little bit easier for us so long as we had maintain that pool of individual cross-trained individuals. Like I said, we have 4, really 5 now on days that can fill in. Even if we could train up that amount of people and discretionarily throughout the shift determine who's working. There's 3 individuals that are trained. We have 1 clinician, and we'll pair it up. So we would love to have those extra bodies, but it's to the point, Network 180, they really came through for us. They stood up. They said, here's another clinician. We said, we'll worry about our staffing on our end. We'll make sure there's somebody there for them.
Perfect. Yeah, I know that isn't snap your fingers. That happens tomorrow, but I'm just it's good to have goals. So what's the we've got to know what we're trying to hit. So
well, I've said before, it would be great to have that 24/7 coverage. However, the full-time day coverage is definitely a huge step in the right direction. Even if we could just get coverage from 5 a.m. in the morning till midnight or something like that, that would, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, sir.
Question. Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chief, for this report. I have 3 questions, if you don't mind answering. One is that you mentioned about foot patrol. You said you're going to put something in place where you can have foot patrol downtown in the downtown area. I would like you to also think about foot patrol in all of our wards, especially in the wards that are heavily filled with crime. Like I said last week, our entire city is important, not just the downtown area, but our residents and neighborhoods as well. I want to make sure that if we're going to do that, let's do it for the whole entire city. The other thing, too, is that there were 21 homicides, and I'm glad to know that 13 of them were closed. But can you tell me how many of them were in our 3rd ward? That's important to me to know how many homicides we had in our 3rd ward, and if those homicides were due to domestic violence or drugs.
We didn't have a terribly high significant amount of drug-related murders this year. We did have a handful of domestic-related murders, and then we had, unfortunately, I would say probably half of our murders were those sort of murders which don't make sense to those of us sitting here. It's the sort of thing where someone insulted someone else on social media, some sort of petty disagreement or a heat of a moment argument where 2 individuals happen to be in the same place at the same time, both armed with handguns, and a fight ensued. I don't have the statistics for the 3rd ward. I know we broke them down by service area. I know that's not a perfect semblance, but I know that statistically the 3rd ward does see a far greater share of gun violence than the rest of the city.
Yeah, that's the reason why I ask. And that I would like to know if it's possible if we could look at something that tells us why the 3rd ward has such high violence, which I have an understanding as to why it does, but I also have an idea as to what we can do to curb that violence, which I'll share with my city manager and my mayor as well. But I think that when it comes to those foot patrols, for me, that's important. It used to be in some cities you got precincts. We don't have precincts in Grand Rapids. Not precincts in terms of police precincts, but we do have voting precincts. But if we're going to do foot patrol, then I would like to have foot patrol done in the entire city of Grand Rapids in those areas that are within our wards that are high crime.
Mr. Chair.
And perhaps, Commissioner, I was being a little bit lazy in my description because my vision is the same, especially with those officers that have that face-to-face interaction with the individuals. I think just because this is more vertical area of the city here where you can walk, a few blocks and see most of the area, I might be hesitating in negative 15-degree weather to say, get out on the street and walk, a few miles to these officers. But I do want them to have in every ward that same relationship with the community. And I think we've made significant improvements with our DICE program, where the officers have been having meeting after meeting in face-to-face contact with the individuals. So we're headed in that direction, and I know we are making progress. We just graduated 8 recruits 2 days ago. I'm sorry, it was on Friday. They started yesterday. So as well as 2 lateral transfers. So we're filling the vacancies at a slightly higher rate than attrition, which means we're making progress. And I think we'll continue to see progress. And the more officers that we have, the more time that they can spend doing the things that I want to see them do and you want to see them do.
Yeah, not all of the people in Grand Rapids are against the Grand Rapids PD. We believe in public safety, and a lot of people in the 3rd Ward really believe that they need the officers to do their jobs effectively. So we kind of want to make it very clear, at least, I'm speaking of more this year for the new year coming. I'm probably going to be a tyrant in 23. But the key thing is I want to make sure that we do have a safe city, but there are some things that I think we need to really think about doing for public safety to make sure that the community is aware of what's going to take place with police officers being in foot patrol.
Yes, sir.
Okay. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, in addition to what the chief said, agree that the data-informed community engagement effort is one that we specifically started in the 3rd Ward because it was the highest episode of gun violence, and also remind this body and the public that the Cure Violence Initiative that we have deployed in partnership with the Urban League and the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability is piloted specifically in the 3rd Ward, where we have violence interrupters who are on the streets. They're not uniformed with police officers, but they are specifically targeting the places of high crime within the 3rd Ward and working with community members to disrupt those patterns of violence.
Very good. Colleagues, anyone else? The dais, please.
Just a quick question. I know this is over your head, but, over your pay grade. But this business with this fentanyl and what a plague that is, it seems to me that if you catch somebody that's dealing fentanyl, and we know fentanyl kills, why can't that lead to a murder conviction?
Well, there is a specific charge for if an individual does die of an overdose, and we can trace back where that dealer came from. There's an enhanced charge of something other than just sales. It's delivery causing death or something to that extent. And it is a charge that my vice team does pursue and has been successful in obtaining. So we are all for that. It's a real concern to us.
It seems that that's worthy of public notice.
Agreed, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very good. Yes, please. Mr. Lim.
Chief, just curious about the auto thefts. Are most of those vehicles being recovered? Are they being chopped up, sold? Like, what's the story behind that a little bit?
I appreciate that question. So if we were having this conversation 10 or 15 years ago, the answer would probably be chopped up, sold, this is for profit. But in this particular year or so, this trend of stealing Hyundais and Kias has turned into a TikTok game where the goal is not profit. Now, oftentimes these vehicles are used in other, sometimes violent crimes. We've actually had murders in these stolen vehicles around Kent County this year. We've had some robberies, but by and large, the vehicles are stolen to be used to make social media posts of kids driving on lawns, et cetera. Mostly the age group's about 13 to 16 years old for most of the offenders. And then, as you said, a lot of times, to be honest, we will find them when they run out of gas. That's when we get them.
So just to clear, these aren't necessarily violent offenders that are doing this. This is maybe just kids.
Right. Well, that's correct. And a lot of time it is kids, and it's kid stuff, and they're being silly. However, they're taking oftentimes, the transportation of a single mom of how she's getting to her job. So I don't want to minimize that. And as well, like I said, they have been used in murders. It's a very easy vehicle to steal if you're doing something other than, it's a game to a lot of these kids. But if you have in your heart the desire to do some more heinous crime and you need a getaway vehicle, it's very easy to steal one of these. And so we have seen them used in extremely violent crimes as well.
just wanted to commend you all based upon all the work that you all have done throughout the course of this past year. I mean, nearly 500 guns that have been taken off the streets, 487 in that capacity, and then the 22 lives that were saved. Truly grateful for that endeavor, and we are truly excited about what the SRT continues to do. And so thanks to all aspects that continue to work together with the community partnerships as well.
Thank you very much, Reverend Doctor. I appreciate that.
Any others? Okay. Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you, Chair.
Our next item on the agenda is a discussion of options to improve public health and safety downtown and in neighborhoods. And I'll turn to City Manager Washington to open things up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I wanted to just follow up from the discussion last week. And I know we've gotten a significant number of emails from the public inquiring about what actions the City Commission or the Public Safety Committee will take relative to ordinances that were proposed, and to remind the public in this body that before you, we don't have any recommended actions for approval. This is all staff analysis, staff work, staff administrative recommendations that we will move forward, but there is no ordinance to be adopted today or tonight at the City Commission meeting. However, what we will do, Ms. Barron's Deputy City Manager will provide an overview of some of the services that we are offering to the unhoused community, as well as a inventory of all the current city ordinances that are already existing. These are not new ordinances. These are ordinances that are already existing that could be used to enforce some of the behaviors, some of them, particularly the more aggressive and dangerous behaviors, and she'll go through that, as well as talk about some of the things that we want to do more holistically in addressing the issue of housing and housing affordability. So I think that they are about ready. Are you ready?
We're apparently working on a technical issue here.
Okay. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Behrens and ask her to walk us through the presentation. And if you can hold your questions until the end, that would be helpful.
Thank you. So the manager did talk about today's objectives. I just want to reiterate that we are here again to present an overview of the more comprehensive city response. So we've been here several times in the last few months talking about the fact that we do recognize that public health and safety require resources and responses from beyond our traditional first responder departments. And so today's presentation is continuing on that theme. As we mentioned, we are here really as a result of some conversations that happened at the Commission's meeting last Tuesday. The Commission did receive some communication signed on by many stakeholders expressing ongoing concerns, particularly focused in the downtown on behaviors, disrupting and disturbing behavior, as well as advocating for additional or continued support for those experiencing homelessness or housing instability. At that meeting, we also heard from many other stakeholders expressing concern about additional regulation and talking again about additional resources really being the response that was necessary. The Commission had a brief opportunity to provide their feedback, Commission members, and noted that there are a number of ordinances and provisions that already exist to address the behaviors or many of the behaviors that were complained about in particular, and that we had been making a number of investments in facilities and services over time, and so that perhaps the time was ripe to provide some more in-depth information to the community, and that this Public Safety Committee meeting would be a good venue to start that conversation. So we're here tonight to provide, or this afternoon, to provide some of that overview and also to foreshadow meetings in the first part of 2023, where we will do some more community engagement and some more in-depth conversation. So I wanted to first highlight some of the investments that the city has undertaken particularly with respect to facilities and services for those experiencing housing instability. So I want to focus here on really the time period since the pandemic. And so some of the things captured on this slide were efforts and facilities that that the city stood up during the pandemic, during the height of the pandemic, to ensure that we were able to provide safe and socially distanced areas for people who either needed overnight emergency shelter or places to be during the day. So some of those programs have now closed, but we continue to have overnight emergency shelter beds that are adequate to serve the population that we have. Some of these efforts are ongoing. So, for example, during the pandemic, we did start this initiative to store personal belongings to assist people from having to carry those those belongings from place to place, and also to address some of the concern about belongings accumulating in the right-of-way. That program does continue, so that pilot was successful. We're able to continue our partnership with Mel Trotter to continue to offer that. Some other things that are continuing is availability of day and warming and cooling centers, and my next slide has some more detail about that. We also have a permanent 24/7 public restroom available that came in during the pandemic. And in front of the commission over the last couple months, projects have been approved that will add to our public restroom stock downtown, both at Hartside Park and Veterans Park. We continue to invest in affordable housing, knowing that and understanding that housing is really a huge part of the need here and a huge part of the solution. So the Affordable Housing Fund Board started its work this year and anticipates putting a request for proposals out on the street, as well as our continued investment through other federal dollars in rapid rehousing and other facilities. So here, and this will be posted on our website, so nobody needs to jot this down as fast as I'm going to move through this slide, but we do have a number of facilities throughout the community to offer warming center locations to ensure that folks are able to come in during the inclement weather in the winter. We also invest in services. So again, this body has gotten a number of presentations over the last several months about our various co-response models. And you heard a little bit today from the chief about expanding some of those services. So our homeless outreach team was expanded in 2021 and continues to really be that bridge between people living unhoused and unsheltered and a variety of services and service providers. So continuing to make a lot of contacts. You see some data there on the screen, and continuing to be kind of a first response that is trained to deal with some of the challenges that we may be seeing. Mental health crisis is a reason for many of the calls to GRPD, and is implicated in another 30% of calls that GRPD is called to. And so the HOT team can be a bridge to more appropriate services being provided and trying to intervene in some of those situations. And they receive trauma-informed care training and implicit bias training and a number of other trainings to help them be positioned to provide that service. You've heard in the last month or two some very specific information about our mobile crisis response and partnership with Network 180 and the substantial impact they are making there, again, to getting people into the right sort of supportive service where otherwise they may be seen in the justice system. We also invest with a number of community partners on services, stability services, and outreach services. You can see the significant investment there at the bottom of the screen. But again, focused on, you'll see the substantial amount of our investment there on homelessness prevention, emergency shelter, rapid rehousing, rental assistance, all those sorts of stability services to make homelessness rare and brief, and hopefully one time, and we continue to build out those services with our partners. We also invest in enforcement, so there continue to be behaviors that are criminal or require a response and follow-up and disruption of that behavior, and we continue to invest in those things. So before turning over to Chief Winstrom in a moment with some more details on particular ordinances that are available to us, I did want to reiterate some of the other non-GRPD investments we've made, and we have presented again to this body and the commission in the past these similar sorts of resources we have brought to bear against violent crime. So over the summer, we talked a little bit about parks and the MLK area and how we were partnering across a number of departments to disrupt violent crime. We have talked about that in the downtown in the past, and we have highlighted some of these other programs. So I will just touch on them very quickly, but we do continue to partner and use some city resources to enhance private security. So that's been used both in parks and in some of our downtown areas in partnership with DGRI, just having some additional trained people out and about that can help enhance that feeling of safety. The chief has presented in the past about his program, Data Informed Community Engagement, and that is again, a sort of comprehensive and partnering, relationship building effort with the community to talk about safety and public safety and what leads to feelings of safety and actual safety and how we all have a role in that. And there have been initiatives, not only in MLK area and Burton Heights area, but we highlighted a pilot initiative in the Hartside neighborhood that was quite successful earlier in the summer. We have talked a little bit before also about redeployment of officers. So the GRPD officers assigned to HOT are now under the command of the downtown or central area captain, and that has led to some more adaptable day of ability to target that resource where it needs to be. We also have talked about, and the chief has talked about, redeployment of SRT downtown to allow more on the ground and timely response to some things that we're seeing there. We've talked about mobile camera trailers in the past, something we haven't highlighted in detail, but we do take a look at the environmental components that lead to safety and feelings of safety. So that's called CEPTED. And if I had to spell out that acronym right now, I probably would fail. But we have both CEPTED expertise within our police department that we have brought to bear. They have done reviews in areas. We have partnered to make changes that come out of that analysis. We also have a CEPTED ordinance that we apply to particular types of businesses in the city. That enforcement is now underway. We had gone to more of an educational and a supportive role during the pandemic because things were challenging for lots of businesses during the pandemic. But we are now back into education and enforcement of ensuring that those CEPTED rules are followed for those businesses. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to the chief briefly to go over some in more specific, some of the ordinances that we do have that address some of the behaviors we have been hearing more complaints about, and then I'll be back to wrap it up.
As Ms. Barron said, during the last commission meeting, there was a lot of talk about what other ordinance are there to address illegal behavior downtown. And we do have a municipal code which addresses things like littering, trespassing, blocking sidewalks, public urination, other disruptive behavior, and we do empower our officers to address it by warning, by issuing tickets, or by arrests, and we have been doing that. I will say you'll notice that there's a crossed out one on here. There's actually a few crossed out, and I've said it before, but the Constitution for us at the Grand Rapids Police Department is not an impediment. It's the explicit direction on how to do our job. And so when we do review some of these older ordinances and we see that they're not in line with either the due process provided by the 14th Amendment, such as the willfully annoy another person, I would be in jail with my wife for that one if that was actually enforceable. But and then like utter profane language, there are circumstances in which swearing is illegal, but in general, it's not something that we can simply arrest someone for just because they happen to be swearing in public. So when
Chief, just before
Yes, sir.
you go on, because I don't want us to rush this, because I don't want to come back here to this committee and talk about these ordinances again. If you could just go back to the first list and let's go through them seriatim, as painful as it may be, so that there's an appropriate public understanding of what the current ordinances are and take us through them. And I'm
Sure.
sure this committee will be patient to hear it. We're not in a hurry, so if you
I
could.
won't keep you too long, though. So assault and battery is illegal both at the city level and the state level. Molest another person in this manner. Molest means something other than a sexual nature. It means to disturb or annoy in a way that's been defined different ways by a court, but it's something that we could look up. Obviously, obstructing free, uninterrupted passage on the street, that is what it says. You cannot legally stand on the street and say, it's my right to be here, and block the vehicle in front of me or block pedestrian traffic. That is illegal. Trespass, again, is one of those crimes. It is illegal at the state level. It's also illegal at the city level. And there's more definitions. The prowling of premises would be something that would also fall into various definitions of trespass. Add would lurk, lie in wait, or concealed, which also could be indicative of an attempt to commit another crime. And an attempt to commit a crime is also illegal based on which crime we're discussing. Damage to city property, damage to any property, defacing property, graffiti, etc., is illegal by city ordinance. Theft, take or remove any property not your own, and fraud, as well as even disconnecting on, sort of malicious behavior, unplugging someone else's cable or unplugging property, lights that are plugged in downtown, Christmas lights and things like that. Again, defacing property, illegal at the state and city level. Defecating and urinating in a place that's not a designated restroom facility is illegal. Being in a state of public intoxication, I'll say a little bit more of this, in a way that makes you a danger to the safety of another person is illegal, as well as being in such a state that's causing a public disturbance. Now, it used to be illegal simply to be high. Since marijuana is now legal, it is not illegal to be high on marijuana in public at this time. Peeping into windows is illegal, as well as indecent exposure is illegal at the city level. Loitering at past time when you're asked to leave is another form of trespass, but it's specifically addressed here. And this is very broad, but creating a disturbance, getting in a fight in a public place. A quarrel would be simply an argument, but to reach the point where you would be arrested for a quarrel, it would have to get to the point where it's disturbing others. I did mention that uttering profane language in itself is not necessarily illegal in a situation where it was so disturbing or so offensive that it was bothering other individuals to the point it could reach the criminal level. We have other ordinances in the city. As you can see, the International Fire Code, which we've adopted through city ordinance. You cannot block ingress and egress places. It is dangerous and it is illegal. Accumulating, there's code enforcement. Some of these are enforced by code enforcement. You could go through litter accumulation on street, alley, or property. Generally, it would be code enforcement that enforce those against the property owner. Parks and Recreation has policies which are enforceable, including being in the park after hours, having a fire in the park, alcoholic beverage in the park, camping in the park. There are other city ordinances outside of those, such as simply depositing litter on the street. That's enforceable by both code enforcement and the Grand Rapids Police Department. Littering the park, the same way. And I don't have this one memorized. Interior personal property, placing your own public property on the public right-of-way for over 24 hours, I believe it is, for storage, is both code enforcement problem and illegal. Any questions on any of those? And this is not all-encompassing. I mean, I mentioned the constitutional aspect because any city really that's been around for as long as Grand Rapids has, if you look at the municipal code, you'll find some old chapters which probably are no longer enforceable. I know in the jurisdiction I came from, there was still a law in the books, spitting on a sidewalk was still criminally enforceable. So it's just how it is. When we put our police officers or other enforcement officers in the situation that they're going to take someone's liberty away or issue a fine, we want to make sure that we're on solid constitutional footing before we do so. I'll either take questions or turn it over to Mr.
We have a couple more slides and then we'll pause for questions. I didn't think you were going to cover chapter 25 and 41 and 151, but good job.
I know, right?
I thought Ms. Barron was going to cover
do
that.
that part. Right. So next step. So we have outlined all of these tools available to us to address some of these behaviors. The city manager is directing the appropriate departments that were summarized in the prior slides to respond to, de-escalate, and remedy violations of these codes and ordinances and enforce where there's a threat to public health and safety. I do want to highlight here, so we talked at a high level about the kinds of behaviors that are prohibited by those provisions. I do want to highlight here that simply sitting or lying on a public right-of-way, as long as others can still pass through the sidewalk, can still drive down the street, is not something that is illegal or prohibited. So sitting and lying, as long as people can still otherwise traverse the rights of way, is permitted. And panhandling, aggressive panhandling, where it doesn't rise to the level of threatening or otherwise molesting or harassing that the chief outlined, also not covered by current ordinances. And so part of the conversation we're starting today and looking ahead a little bit is with focused enforcement, with deliberate and intentional action in all of these fronts. Are we covering what we need to cover, or are there gaps at the end of this that we believe need to be filled? So that'll be part of an ongoing conversation. We will also be meeting with our partners in this, particularly in the area of the unhoused, homelessness, mental health, drug dependency, to look at the effectiveness of our services. And again, what are the gaps? What are the resources that we're bringing to bear? And are we getting the outcomes that we're looking for? There are a number of initiatives in this region, in this community, that are looking at the same thing. And so we are going to be doing our assessment and having those hard conversations and involving the Public Safety Committee at certain points to engage the public on those conversations. We will also be doing some public education. So we just provided some very high flyover information, a lot of legalese. We will be putting out some public information for, here's what I'm seeing, who should I call, and what should I expect to happen. Some of the ordinances and statutes that we've talked about are enforced by police. They're obviously available by 911 24/7. Others are, you saw the fire marshal has a role, not a 24/7 response line. So we are going to be putting out some public information about what to expect, who to call, and what to expect to happen after you make that call. Again, I've talked a little bit about what we'll be doing looking ahead, but we do expect to come to the City Commission early at their first January meeting to give that overview of what are the initiatives underway that are designed to improve our system's response, particularly for housing instability. Where do those initiatives sit right now? How are we in the public engaging in those? And where do we need to go next? That should set the stage for more in-depth engagement with this committee and with the public. And we expect that to start later in January. We're also going to continue to do some internal review and some looking at other resources that we may be able to tap into. So one of the things we didn't talk a lot about today, but we do have resources that are available and we have used in the downtown to clean up rights of way and sidewalks where we see accumulation of property and litter. And we pick that up. If it's abandoned property, we store it for an appropriate amount of time. If it's trash, we dispose of it. We're able to do that with some city resources. The DGRI has an ambassador program, and they are able to do that in the downtown. We're going to be exploring ways that maybe we can have an ambassador-like program in some of our other business corridors. We're going to be working with MDOT. We see, again, litter and property accumulating under and within the state-controlled rights of way, and are there ways we can partner to get quicker response and cleanup in those areas? We're also going to be continuing to engage our service providers to figure out how we can best engage and make sure that we are meeting community expectations in terms of responding to these issues. And I mentioned already our continued investment in housing. So those are some things that we'll continue to work on. And with that, we are here to answer questions. There's staff in the audience to answer questions as well.
Thank you, Ms. Behrens. Before I turn to my colleagues, I have a few questions. This first one is for Chief Winstrom. Chief, you alluded to a number of the existing ordinances, and what I've heard in conversation, was not able to attend the meeting on last week. I was able to listen to the meeting, the recorded version, and heard from a number of folks, obviously, who were there at the meeting, as well as I've had some ongoing conversations with residents and business owners, not just downtown, but throughout the city. And it keeps on coming back to the issue of enforcement. And I know that we are operating now, under the budgeted amount of officers. And I know, in fact, there was, correct me if I'm wrong, the passing last year of the COPS grant that was specifically for officers for downtown, correct? And so I know that that's kind of still in the process as well. And so in my conversations with business owners and residents and such throughout the city and downtown, their communication to me is that a call will be made to 911, and that the response quite often is that, there's not an opportunity to get there based on the level of the offense, coupled with the fact that there just aren't folks available, there aren't any officers available. So the question I have is, why are we not considering what's being offered by other law enforcement departments within our area to assist, since we are currently, at a place right now in terms of not having the adequate, or because we're not fully staffed with GRPD, why are we not considering taking up help from the likes of the Kent County Sheriff's Department, which has offered to come alongside and assist as we are dealing with this shortage?
We have a great relationship with the Sheriff's Department. They're extremely helpful and have been helpful since my time here. And over the summer, when we really had a spike in crime, June and July, we saw 11 murders, and we saw our highest level of violence downtown. That's when we had 4 individuals shot on Pearl Street. And that's when this subject first came out. And the sheriff was approached, and she said, I just don't have the staff to help. And that's what my response would have been, too, if she had asked me for outside. We were just all short across the city. Now that crime has subsided throughout the other side of the city, really mostly because of the weather. I know that the sheriff has more capacity to do so, but we have more capacity to do so also, and that's why we've been able to dedicate more resources downtown, sort of in the slow areas. If this leads us to a place where, if I'm surprised by some sort of staffing challenge that I didn't see, and we're having this conversation again in April, May, June, when it warms up, I certainly would embrace any help from anyone that wants to come and provide more assistance. But keep in mind that when we do ask for an outside law enforcement agency to come in, that's a law enforcement agency, and I have the utmost respect for Kent County Sheriff, but that's an agency that operates under their rules, their use of force policy, their training, their standards, and I want to be responsible for the law enforcement in the city of Grand Rapids, and I have the utmost faith in my police department to do the right thing at all times, and I have a lot of faith in our partners, but I know that I want to be able to say that the Grand Rapids Police Department is providing that top-level gold standard of policing, and I can't guarantee that from anyone else. So in a perfect world, we want to do it. We're best positioned to do it. We have those connections with the community. The sheriff's not involved in our DICE program, so she doesn't really know the neighborhoods like we do. She doesn't know what the community wants as well as we do. If it came down to a level of violence that we see again, that we need more bodies in the area, I would certainly take her up on that. But in an ideal world, GRPD should do it ourselves.
Okay.
Hope that answers.
Yeah, please.
Commissioner, I just want to go back to the earlier COP grant for clarification. I know that initially when there was a discussion of leveraging private funding for the COPS grant, it was to utilize those resources within the boundaries of downtown, because some of that was going to be used by the DID, but I think the city commission approved general fund funding for it, and so those cops, those officers are not restricted to just being downtown. It's wherever the chief would see to deploy them.
Okay. I also want to, take an opportunity really to, it seems that perhaps now might be a really good time to, based on the next steps, an opportunity to pull in and have perhaps more substantive conversations with our partners, with service providers within the county. It seems that there's the opportunity to, the opportunity is there where we have Kent County talking more and more about and investing in affordable housing, And when if we look at this issue, from more of a complete angle, it's not just about certain aspects of those who are unhoused. It's how can we provide the wraparound that will perhaps get them to a place where they aren't unhoused. They have options around housing. They have options around opportunities, and perhaps now might be the time to pull together somebody, some small committee that could really hone in and focus on some solutions in the next 30 to 60 days. And I put that out there, obviously, for you, City Manager, for the mayor and my colleagues who will be here on next year. But it just seems like if there was ever a time to really, take the bull by the horn, it's now, since everyone seems to be leaning in all the more around this issue. And so I'd like to offer that up as a possible solution, because I think that's the opportunity presents itself right now.
Commissioner, and I think Ms. Behrens highlighted earlier that being part of the intent to have a more holistic community conversation, especially when we have a lot of good people that are doing work in this space, and some of them are here today, and we appreciate the effort, and this has been a long-standing initiative. I remember taking a tour of Mel Trotter and seeing the executive directors and being shown Mel Trotter himself when he first came to this city in early 1900s. So this has been a 100-year issue that we have compassionately addressed as a community that has resulted in over 1,000 shelter beds for emergency shelter. And that is great for temporary solutions, but that does not address the issue permanently. And we have to now have that conversation, and I know a lot of people have been having it. We have, as you mentioned, and the effort that's happening with the county now with the revolving loan fund. We have the Housing Stability Alliance. We have the Continuum of Care. We have the Essential Needs Task Force. We have Housing Camp. There are so many people that are doing good work. But I think it's time for us to sit back and really evaluate the outcomes and determine our plan moving forward. And I think that was a vision for Housing Kent. But I do think it's time to have these conversations publicly, where all those who are concerned about it can hear the plans for this community moving forward. So I agree with you. I'm looking forward to those conversations.
Thank you, City Manager. Colleagues?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chief, for the explanation of going over, not explanation, but reading the existing ordinance. I'm glad you went through them line by line. I want to make it very clear that these ordinances are for the citizens of Grand Rapids and those that come into Grand Rapids. I want to make sure that we understand this ordinance is not just set for a particular group of people, but it's for the entire community. So I wanted to make that clear. Because I know with the homeless situation that we have, a lot of people are focusing on criminalizing the homeless. But there are times when we have people who aren't homeless who vandalize stuff in the city of Grand Rapids. So I think as the city manager and Commissioner Jones made it clear about making sure that the public is aware of these ordinances is so important, and that we get communication out continuously. And so as Third Ward City Commissioner, I'm going to do my part in my ward to make sure that these ordinances are known in the upcoming year, so that we can improve the city and improve my ward, because I don't want violence to continue to rise in the Third Ward anymore.
Thank you. Commissioner?
Thank you, Commissioner. Let's see here. First, I'll start with the HOT team. I think, again, I've been really happy with the work of the HOT team. Impressed with what they're doing. Similar to the question about mental health professionals, I think there's going to be the redeployment of the officers from the HOT team to serve regular roles, but still have them available is great. I think that's a good step to help address some concerns. But if we want to get to 24/7 HOT team coverage, maybe Chief Lehman can answer that question. How many more do we need? How many more fire? I know we approved some more firefighters this morning to add to the roster. We've made some changes last meeting for sergeant and captain. But what else do we need to get to that level? I think that's question one. A lot.
We need to hear you on the mic, Chief. Chief, if you can come to the mic and address that so the public can hear your response.
Yes, sir. The hot team to go to a 24/7 model would need to triple the number of people that we have right now. So it would roughly be 36 from the 12 that we're at right now.
And careful, so if you can, I know you're going to have the presentation, so that's not 36 firefighters.
No, that's not 36 firefighters. That would be a total of 9 firefighters. It would be, as the team exists right now, it would be a total of 12 police officers, and it would be a total of 15 associates from Network 180.
Thank you, sir. My next question for the chief. So as it relates to the offenses, and thank you for going through these and explaining some of these, and I'm glad to see some the incorporation of the fire code stuff and the building code stuff and the park stuff. And I think those are other important things. But as it exists in your mind, what are the gaps in ordinance that exist that are maybe preventing your officers from enforcing some? If there are bad activities that aren't enforceable given current ordinance. Maybe that's.
I'll tell you the activity that is most brought to my attention is the high-profile things like the individual with a piece of rebar that was a mentally unwell individual. Those are the big things. Second to that would be individuals who are sleeping in places that, such as in front of a doorway or something like that, and that's where it gets to the point where a lot of times they'll call 911 and expect a police officer to come, and we'll look at the situation. Another good example is storing personal items on the sidewalk. If it doesn't obstruct the passage of an ADA-compliant wheelchair, it's not something that the police department can do. So a lot of people have an idea that if I call the police, they'll take care of this, and then when we do show up, they're extremely disappointed that we're not going to address something that's not there. Having said that, it's a very political question, and I work for. So it's I mean, the benefit of being the police is we don't write the law, we enforce the law. There's just 3 aspects of my job, and that's me motivating the police officers to do the right thing, and what are the there's really 3 aspects in policing, and that's what the community wants, what you can get the police officers to do, and that's generally what, they all want to do the right thing, and then there's the law. So when all 3 of those come together, that's where we are. And that's every single day, that's what we look for. And so if there's that law piece and the community piece, I don't have control over that. I can just tell the police officers, these are our marching orders, this is what we're doing for the good of the city, and we'll get it done.
I want to just clarify, and the chief answered it well. It is not the police department's role to determine policy. That is the role of the governing body, the elected officials, based on the will of the constituents that they represent. And the department will faithfully execute whatever policy is in place. And what I do expect the departments to use is discretion. And not every law should be enforced with the same type of diligence. I mean, particularly, we don't expect there to be over-criminalization for minor offenses. And I think that was the practice during 2020 when there was a lot of de-escalation during the pandemic, a lot of understanding. And I think now that we are post-pandemic and people don't have to have social distance as much, and we do have adequate shelter space. What I think some of the members of the community want to know, what is the will of our leadership moving forward, and the police department will help to enforce that. And I think the expectation, though, is if there are laws that are on the books or that are written in ordinance, and these are violent offenses, people are expecting police response to either prevent or to deter those things from happening. And Chief, don't feel bad. CPTED, said earlier, is crime prevention through environmental design.
Show off.
Yep, any other questions?
Thank you, Chief. That's a good answer. Appreciate that. Again, I guess my last is just a comment generally, and I'm glad to see this on here, and I think I've been beating this drum, at least internally with some of my colleagues and the city manager, is I want to see some more investment from the city on some things around cleanliness in terms of our neighborhoods. We have to give people an opportunity to make the right decision, and so it's really hard to make the right decision with what to do with your trash if you don't have a trash can to throw it in. It's really hard to expect people to be clean if we're not giving an opportunity for them to do that. And there is some level of enforcement on the back end. There's clearly a law in the books that says you shouldn't litter, but if there's not a trash can for you to throw your trash in, or there's not a bathroom for you to use, it's really difficult for you to make the right decision for yourself. And so I'm hopeful and want to see the city and our partners figure out how to improve outcomes in some of those spaces, whether that's more public trash cans and private trash cans, more public restrooms and private restrooms. I think those are all things that we need to invest in. And I also am really glad to see this conversation that we need to have with MDOT. I think I see Mr. Jordan sitting in the back there. It's really easy to cite someone for having a bunch of trash in their private residence, but can we hold MDOT to that same standard, that if you have a mattress out in front of your highway off-ramp, they should be required to pick that up too, even if they didn't put it there. So I hope we can find a way to help create some, off-ramps are the first place a lot of people come when they visit Grand Rapids and see our city, and it's not super welcoming to a downtown, a neighborhood, a business district if it's just a wasteland for misfit toys.
We'll certainly follow up on those cleanliness issues, and I already see our friends from the media already emailing MDOT asking them the very questions that you just posed.
If that's what it takes, city manager.
Colleagues down to my left, anybody? Yes, please, Chris.
I was really happy to see all the services that are already being offered. I don't think that most of the community really understands the depth of what is being done right now, and certainly, we've all talked that more can be done, and we would like more to be done, and we would like to come up with solutions. I understand that. I know a number of people that will try to take matters in their own hands, and they'll go down and bring coats, and they'll get boots, and offer to take some of our unhoused people for lunch. And I think I just wish there was like a coordinated one place that people could go to, that they could call and say, I would like to do this, and I would like to help these people in this area. They don't understand what's being done right now. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I think that this needs to be communicated a little bit better. And even if there is something on the city website that says all of this under a heading of unhoused, what we do for the unhoused population or something like that, services offered to the unhoused population, that would be really helpful. And where can you go if you'd like to help? So that's my only comment.
Thank you.
That's great feedback.
Thank you much. Please, Mr. Lim.
First questions are for Ms. Behrens. Curious, the report you offered cites what city investments are since 2020. And just curious what it has looked like prior to that, and if most of these investments have come out of federal relief dollars for pandemic, or if they're coming out of general fund dollars. Where's the money coming from for these investments?
Going back prior to 2020, I'll have to do more research and get back to you on that. That we were focused on that snapshot, trying to turn this around relatively quickly. Many of the things that we did during the pandemic were federal relief dollars. So some of the things that we started and have now stopped were federal relief dollars. We are finding money in our budget, or the commission, I should say, is finding money in the budget to continue some of the things that were particularly successful. So the storage program, for example, and some of the other ongoing support services that we have done that you see, the rapid rehousing. Those are the level of investment that I've cited there. I'd have to go back to see what they were pre-2020, but rapid rehousing, emergency shelter, those are things that we have historically funded, again, largely through federal dollars like CDBG and other sources. We can give you a better accounting, but.
Yes, a comment. In our research, 79% of the general fund goes towards police, fire, fiscal services, tax collection. So there's not a lot left for things like affordable housing in terms of discretionary dollars for the city. We have $5 million in ARPA funds for affordable housing, but yet we haven't seen a concerted investment from the city historically in addressing this crisis. This predates 2020, and I just want to bring that to the public attention, that we have not seen the kind of necessary investments in this segment of our community from the city of Grand Rapids, and that's a failure on our part. And to take then and move towards even considering ordinances that would further penalize those community members, I think is an outrage. My next question is for the chief. And it's a question around enforcement. You mentioned warnings, fines, arrests as sort of the level of escalation in terms of enforcement. If a fine is issued to a community member and they don't have money, right, they're living on the street, what happens if they can't pay the fine?
I've never gone through the system here, but previous jurisdiction I worked in, that would be an issue for the administrative law judge to work through. And if you can actually show that you don't have that income, then the fine would be either just thrown out or be turned into a day of community service or something other than that.
And if they don't show for community service?
I think we should defer to our city attorney that
even
will
better.
be able to help us.
Right, so it's the judge's decision, so it's gonna depend what they want to do. From my experience, most times they waive it because they know they have the inability to pay. And if they don't pay, there's that option of either you hold them in contempt, they go to jail, but most times with especially our unhoused population, that doesn't happen.
Most times.
Most
right?
times.
There's always the opportunity that they do go to jail.
Yeah, absolute. I won't speak in absolute because every judge is different and they get to choose what they want to do.
Yep. Mr. Chair, if I could, I think we're well sensitive to making sure, again, I mentioned earlier that we don't utilize enforcement to solve homelessness, because that's not going to solve the problem. And in the instances where there are ordinances that are enforced, I do think it behooves us to work even closer with the courts and the judge to make sure that there are restorative practices, diversionary practices that would lead to good outcomes. That doesn't create more systematic problems. I do want to also respond to the earlier comment about the investments that were outlined earlier by Ms. Behrens. And I think every community during the pandemic received an infusion of federal funds to address the unhoused community and housing, because it's a national crisis, particularly in mid-sized and large urban communities. And so we are definitely going to leverage those resources, and I think sustainability is a big concern, and so there's some urgency to make sure that the programs that we have put in place, the ones that are effective, that we're able to evaluate and identify ways to sustain them moving forward. And so those are things that we will be looking at moving forward, working with the commission as a whole as we go through future budget processes.
With all due respect, City Manager, I think your comment about not enforcement not being the solution to homelessness is spot on. Yet that is exactly what's being proposed in the ordinances that's put forward by the chamber, right? So I just want to be clear that when we're saying that should not be the solution, this is exactly what's being put forward in front of this body that's required to make these decisions. And that's what I wanted to communicate to the public in this moment, that we're not, yes, that might be the sentiment in this body, but that's not the sentiment that's being pushed from the chamber and Mr. Lunger and his colleagues.
Mr. Chair, if I could clarify. So what you heard today was the staff's briefing about steps moving forward, and the staff did not recommend any of the ordinances regarding panhandling or sitting and lying in public spaces. We presented to you a very holistic, comprehensive approach that that we're bringing forward to this body, and will be not for approval, but for information, and we'll be implementing.
I truly do appreciate the efforts that appear to be before us in terms of trying to expand the hot team. I think that's very important in that capacity, and I think it's important that we examine the course of the quality of life of all individuals across the city of Grand Rapids, and it is imperative that we recognize that we're all one crisis away from being on the other side. And in that particular narrative, I hope that we would take into consideration the efforts of informing those individuals that use dégagé and use mail trotter more about some of the city ordinances that are out there, and we look forward to working together in a more collaborative effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to underscore the comments that have to do with giving the public information. Now, you're going to be working on it for in the next month or two, but there's so many excellent stories of work already being done, especially the stories that coordinate with other agencies beside police. The hot teams, Network 180, those are important aspects to, getting at systemic issues. So secondly, I think it's at least the public's eye here, and I live downtown, are ready to see more police in the streets, more police. So I think that discussion can be revisited in terms of the funding and moving forward in that, especially as we come with a strategy that balances out between, it's not a military occupation, this is about really caring for people.
Thank you.
I'll try to be brief. Excellent reports all around, always. This issue, many years ago, being an old guy kind of helps you out once in a while. Back in 1971, it's right around there, Toronto had a problem with homeless and hippies on Yonge Street. And so their solution was to round up the RMPC and on horses, and they just came down and swept everybody off the streets and made them move away. And so I got the call about this issue, and I started to palpitate. I'm thinking, what are you guys asking here? So kind of freaked me out a little bit. Obviously, that's not the issue. But the issue of housing, I've said this before, I'm going to keep pounding this thing. We will not fix the affordable housing problem in this city unless we fix the zoning code. The zoning code has absolutely ravaged the city. And if there's no more empirical data than the fact that our schools are imploding and having to have meetings about closing schools, and the lowest population in our public schools in my lifetime, ever. So that's one thing. Zoning code's got to be changed. The other thing is how you treat and how you house people. I would invite everyone, and I can make this happen, but there's a place in Battle Creek called Silver Star Apartments, and it was developed by a former client of mine, Medallion Management, and their thing was about dignity and respect. And Silver Star Apartments is on the campus of Battle Creek Veterans Facility, and the hospital's like footsteps away. However, this place is dedicated 100% to homeless veterans. So the homeless guys are coming there and women are coming in there with all of their baggage, literally and figuratively, and they somehow develop a home where they feel safe, where no one's going to steal their stuff and no one's going to beat them up, and they can learn things. They can learn how to be a chef. They can learn how artwork. They can do whatever. It's a terrific place, and if you're going to house people who are separated and desperate, that's a good model to go by. I would highly recommend it. The other issue is mental health. My family, I deal with mental health in my own family. I have a mentally disturbed person in my family, and I can tell you that accessing mental health in this city is a nightmare. It's just too hard. It's very complicated because it's layered with laws and regulations and everything else. So when people are mentally ill, I had this conversation with the fellow who called me to get me jacked up on this thing to begin with. You know, he said it's about behavior. It's all about their behavior. I said, Johnny, these people don't even know what their behavior is. They don't know from 1 minute to the next. And living with someone who's schizophrenic, I can tell you there's no magic wand. There's no magic way to get this done. It's a horrible process. They all need help, and almost all of them will refuse help, including my family member. That person's just lucky that he can live with us. Otherwise, I don't know where he would be. So there's hundreds of families in the city dealing with this right now. And some of these people are slipping through the cracks and ending up on the streets. And it's just not something we can look at and think, well, just do this and just do that. It's not about behavior. It's about fundamentally understanding how the brain works and what is making this person behave the way they are. And then let's lean on that and not be punitive and not be, judgmental about it, because they don't know. They just don't know. Then the other thing is, last thing is money. Everybody's been coming in this chambers for the last few years saying, we got to have this, we got to have this. It comes down to money. It's not a finite pool here. We're going to need more money. I was happy to see that the City Commission voted to support this idea of signing bonuses or whatever and more pay for incoming police officers and all that stuff. Vital. Absolutely perfect move to make. But that pool of money is going to dry up too. We have to increase the amount of money coming in for this dedicated style of purpose. And I'm happy to commit my old buddy David, and I will be happy to run one more campaign to raise the taxes on the people of City Grand Rapids to do something decent like this. And I think there would be big support if it was properly proposed. And I commend everyone here that's because of the level of compassion and understanding that this commission operates with most of the time. I just think we can get this done in a very cool and calm, collected way without freaking out. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kittle. We have one more presentation before us. Item number 3 is an update from the Grand Rapids Fire Department on the homeless outreach team and staffing needs. Chief Lehman.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the Public Safety Committee. I'd like to speak to you about the homeless outreach team. We established in 2020, and during the height of the pandemic, out of the necessity for us to be able to make sure that there was safe things happening in the community while the outreach teams were not out there doing that kind of work. We found the need that we needed to have a presence out there to make sure that we were addressing some educational needs of the unhoused when it came to masking and mask mandates, and that kind of morphed into the existing team that we have here today, which I'd like to tell you has changed a lot. The nature of our mission has evolved a lot. The outreach team is comprised of 3 different entities. There are 3 firefighters that are currently assigned to the team. There are 4 police officers that are currently assigned to the team. However, those, as you've heard before, those police hot members are cross-staffing downtown service district positions as needed. Network 180 represents the team with 5 personnel, mental health recovery coaches, substance abuse coaches, as well as some behavioral mental health specialists that are able to refer people that they encounter in the field onto increased service levels. The hot team has service hours Monday through Saturday from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. These are some stats that the homeless outreach team has achieved to date. 5,227 total contacts made in outreach. That's over 20 contacts per day. 53 jail and ER diversions, 69 substance abuse. You've got some case management happening there, as well as recovery coaching sessions. So this is a very busy team. This program has morphed and changed over the last 2.5 years since its inception, and to tell you that that it's been a very smooth ride, it absolutely has not. It's been something that has been increased in personnel as a result of the need for covering more shifts out there in the community. We have found that we partner with many different agencies out there, and there's a need for us to coordinate with those agencies and develop relationships with those agencies that can only make that team stronger and better. And we attempt to do as much as that as possible. We act to be that hub of a team that is able to interact on a city level and be able to break down barriers on a city perspective, as well as adapt and do those things necessary to keep our community safe on all levels and all of the members of our community. Ultimately, the HOT team itself, and speaking just from a fire department perspective, we have done this work over the last 2.5 years with overtime, and it has been funded through initially CARES and now ARPA funding, but we did not have we were in a trial period. And so where we're at right now is that I believe that I know that my recommendation right now is that we move this team from the fire department perspective towards a more permanent and staffed team that would be supported financially through budgeted money and personnel on a full-time basis. The overtime right now is impacting the fire department to the negative. We've done an analysis. We can save over $100,000 or roughly $100,000 a year in dollars, but the money that we would save in the inefficiencies within our ordering back personnel on overtime is at a far greater expense than the dollars saved in our pocket. And so in order to make this team sustainable, it's my recommendation that we stabilize this team and ask that consideration be given to the fully staffing of our HOT team members from a fire department perspective.
So this, if there are no objections today, what the chief would prepare to do is prepare an item for future consideration for the city commission fiscal committee and for the additional appropriations for this staffing.
Okay.
I would move that would be a recommendation of this body.
And I support.
Okay. Take a vote.
Take a vote.
Very good. Okay. It's been noted, the motion and the support for this to come back to fiscal. So we will have that noted, but also want to take an opportunity right now to also turn to my colleagues to see if they have any questions or comments. Before I do that, though, I would like to suggest perhaps, again, taking the opportunity right now or in the very near future. This, as we know, HOT was established in 2020. And perhaps this is an opportunity to take a deeper dive into the impact or the effectiveness of the HOT model, and wanted to put that out there as something that hopefully will be considered by my colleagues in the future. Because, again, this is I know that we receive on a pretty regular basis the updates in terms of the outreach that is being done by way of the HOT team, but perhaps again now is a good time to take a deeper dive and look into it. So I'll turn now to my colleagues to see if they have any questions.
Commissioner, I just want to make a statement to the chief. Thank you for the work that the HOT team has done in the city of Grand Rapids, and thank you for your service as you are preparing to leave us. I hope that we'll find the chief that can fit in your shoes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything? No. Colleagues to my left?
Just as Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I think with the motion and the second, if the vote is completed, we could notate that on the report from the city manager from tonight's meeting. So
Okay.
I would ask the completion of that item.
Okay.
Thank you.
Call the question, sir.
Okay, sure. It's been moved. Yes, this is just for the commissioners to vote. I understand it. It's been a motion that's been made it's been moved and supported to have a request brought forward to fiscal for the request that was made in terms of based on the cost analysis brought to us by Chief Lehman, that again would be brought to the fiscal committee by way of the Public Safety Committee. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed have the same right. Motion carries. Very good. Okay.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Yep. Yes. Any other, but before you go, one second, Chief. Any questions down here? No? Okay. All right. All right. I would like to, before I close out, I would like to provide an opportunity, because this is something that, again, is clearly at top of mind for quite a few folks. And again, especially with the turnout that we have here on this afternoon, I'd like to provide an opportunity for our mayor, if you'd like to please come forward to the microphone if you have any remarks regarding the conversations of today, please.
Thanks, Chair.
Yes.
First, I want to thank the entire Public Safety Committee for your service. I appreciated you being willing to add this to your agenda when I recommended it last Tuesday. And quite frankly, as I look out in this room, I see individuals that we all know and have worked with for years. And many of you we've worked with in this space. A couple things I'll add. One, I appreciate all the comments that all of you have made. Chief, both chiefs, thank you for your work and your leadership, and all of the city staff. You know, we are in a moment where the issues faced in our community have been exacerbated by a whole host of issues. And you all talked about this, right? We have a housing crisis. We have a mental health crisis. We are coming out of a global pandemic. And we have complex problems to solve, and this is one of them. But in addition to all the work that Ms. Behrens, our deputy city manager talked about today, there's a lot of work happening in this community and has been for years. I mean, we've come together through the Housing Stability Alliance for years. We have Housing Kent. We're investing and working with Built for Zero. We have the Fuse program looking at frequent users. We have a crisis stabilization unit that is going to come online hopefully soon. We're partnering with the county in ways that we never have before. And I guess for me, a couple of things that I thought about as I sat here is that I wish I had a sea of resources and that I could solve every single one of these problems tomorrow for every single person that is struggling in the city. But that is not the case. The other thing that is true and the reality that we live in is that the city cannot solve these issues by ourselves. And that's why it is critical that we work with the county. The county oversees Network 180 and community mental health and our public health department. And the fact that we have a county that is investing in a revolving fund right now for housing is really something we should all be celebrating. And again, we're not going to solve this overnight. I know it's an urgent issue. But what brings me a lot of hope is that there's a lot of good work happening already. And what we need to move this work forward, in my opinion, is we need good information and data. We need to have the Community Housing Connect data system off the ground. We have to be sharing data. We need reliable data we can base decisions on. We need to identify the gaps in the city. One gap we know we have is supportive housing. We need to help move people out of shelter more quickly into stable housing. Housing's the solution of homelessness. We need to identify the individuals who are resistant to going into shelter. And Ed, many of us know people struggling with mental health, and we need better mental health services. So it's a complex issue. I'm not going to stand up here and pretend that it's not. Commissioner O'Connor and I have talked at length about housing. We don't build housing at the city, but we enable housing to be built in the city. And there are barriers right now. And we need to do our part to address those. But again, I want to be really realistic about what is in our realm of authority to do and what we can do to be a part of the solution. But we need all of us in this room to be working on this together. And we really need to come together. And my hope is that from this conversation comes some positive movement forward. that we don't create more divisiveness in our community, but we really identify solutions, shared priorities that we can move forward together. So just thank you, all of you, for your service. Commissioner Jones, thank you for your years of service in this space, on this commission, leading public safety, fighting to invest in cure violence, and all of the other work that you have done around this table. Thank you for that. And then just thank you to everyone in this room. You're here because you love the city. You're here because you care about people. You don't want to see people sleeping outside. None of us do. None of us do. And so that is what gives me hope that we're coming together and we're going to work together to find some solutions. So thank you. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to speak. I usually don't do that at public safety, so thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak.
You're welcome. Thank you,
Hey,
Mayor.
Mr. Chair, can I say one more thing before?
Please.
I want to take an opportunity for us to just give our chair a round of applause for his chairing this committee in this year of 22. He's been a help to me. He's been a mentor. He's been a friend. And I'm going to miss him, but I will be seeing him from time to time. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I like that color purple you got on too.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, with that, I think we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you.